It was just another spring day for Carole Hinders in the quiet lakeside town of Arnold's Park, Iowa, back in 2013. The 67-year-old entrepreneur owned and operated Mrs. Lady's Mexican Food, a well-known community staple for almost 4 decades. For years, northern Iowans and passers-by could count on this restaurante Mexicano for sizzling spices, a cozy atmosphere, and the owner's warm welcome. To add to the Midwest charm, Mrs. Lady's regular customers, who had become like family, also knew that credit and debit cards were useless when the check arrived. With only cash on the premises, management made regular trips to the bank for safekeeping. While business was good, Carole ran a modest ship, so her deposits remained well below $10,000. She'd been doing it since the Carter administration and never thought anything of it. But on May 22nd of that year, while Carole was enjoying breakfast and a crossword puzzle with her grandchildren in the privacy of her own home, she heard a knock at the door. It was the IRS, and they weren't there to ask about her signature queso sauce. We know the importance of properly claiming and managing our taxes, whether personal or for business. We know the stiff penalties for tax evasion, and we're familiar with the IRS audit horror stories. Still, we understand taxes help maintain our complex society, and therefore we must have some kind of regulation and enforcement to ensure fairness. However, with increased scrutiny over government spending and overreach in recent years, people are asking more than ever. Should we abolish the IRS? Can we abolish the IRS? What would be the consequences versus the rewards? Thanks for stopping by NPC Overrider, where we challenge mainstream source code to develop independent thought, one user story at a time. Let's log into the IRS tax code and check out the latest programming. The mainstream argument on this one says the IRS is essential to our way of life. You can't get rid of it. Majestic B67 on Reddit says taxes are essential to our country and the IRS is the agency responsible for that, but I see tons of people on the right who call it, quote, authoritarian and oppose any attempt to fund or hire more employees to work there. I fully support funding the IRS. I think it's a good investment. Alright, here's the supporting points for that. Number 1, the IRS is a critical moneymaker. Number 2, accountability. 3, they look out for the little guys. Number 4, cans of worms. And number 5, global competition. Point number 1, critical moneymaker. The IRS does more than enforce the tax law, it also collects taxes, to the tune of about $4.47 trillion in 2023 alone, funding essential services such as defense, healthcare, and infrastructure. With income taxes accounting for roughly half of federal income, canning the IRS would severely damage our nation's short and long-term operations. Point 2, accountability. Most people pay what they owe and move on, but not everyone is willing to put in their fair share. The IRS recovers billions through audits and enforcement for people who slip through the cracks. In fiscal year 2023, the IRS collected $31.9 billion in revenue resulting from $500,000 in tax return audits. For context, the tax gap, or uncollected revenue from unpaid taxes, was $606 billion in 2022, down from $617 billion in 2021. Point 3, they look out for the little guys. The IRS manages progressive taxation, so higher earners pay more than those on the lower end of the income spectrum. Without this system in place or federal oversight, lower income people would suffer. Point 4, leave that can of worms alone. Removing or replacing the IRS with another agency would require a complete overhaul of tax policy, leading to years of political strife. This would divert attention from higher priority needs, and revenue collection could severely falter. Practical challenges such as filling the federal income tax gap, legal battles, and economic disruption would prove overwhelming. Point 5, global competition. The US isn't the only nation with a federal revenue service. Here's a few examples from other first world nations. The United Kingdom has the HMRC.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
Germany has the Federal Central Tax Office.
It was the greatest beer in all the world!
France has the Directorate General of Public Finances.
My name is Jean Girard.
South Korea has the National Tax Service.
Hurry up and buy!
And Canada has the Canada Revenue Agency. With most developed nations having IRS counterparts, abolishing ours could put the US at a significant disadvantage as the global community continues to manage income taxes and infrastructure maintenance. Additionally, the IRS regularly collaborates with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, a global agency that partners with 38 member countries to battle tax evasion. Alright, let's take a look at the rebuttal here, which says, get rid of the IRS. Tyrannodorus on X, I think, says, abolish the IRS, a state-sanctioned extortion racket. Main points here: number 1, simplify and amplify; 2, boundaries and trust; 3, stress and errors; 4, economic growth and savings; 5, moral arguments. Number 1, simplify and amplify. The tax code can be super confusing, even for people who do it for a living. With thousands of pages of evolving regulations, the IRS makes it difficult to stay on the up and up, even with the best intentions. Abolishing the IRS would mean a more straightforward system with a flat or national sales tax, which would reduce confusion and unnecessary bureaucracy. A couple years ago in 2023, H.R. 25 was introduced by Congress to impose a 23% national sales tax on consumption in place of the standard income tax. Number 2, boundaries and trust. We've become way too comfortable with the IRS's power to legally audit, penalize, and seize assets. Often, citizens have little to no recourse, even when the government's at fault. The agency isn't known for its customer service, and it's not exactly trust building when the IRS has a militarized enforcement arm complete with door-kicking tactical teams. Few people have had positive experiences with the IRS, and Americans commonly see them as adversaries instead of an organization that helps and guides Americans through tax season. Number 3, stress and errors. Taxes are stressful, even under the best conditions. Knowing you could lose your life savings for a clerical error adds extra stress during the season. Everyday Americans don't have time for complex code and don't often have the money to pay for the professionals who review everything. Not to mention the legal fees that go along with any type of charges. 4, economic growth and savings. If we didn't have to hand over so much of our hard-earned money to the government, people could do wonders with the extra money by saving it or opening a business maybe, which could boost the economy. Countries like Singapore, the Cayman Islands, and the United Arab Emirates have booming economies despite low taxes, as such conditions attract international business. 5, moral arguments. If you own your land, why must you pay property taxes? Sounds more like you're renting it from the government. Call it what you want, but not paying up will result with men in guns or women at your door. Does that seem right? How about the IRS's ability to invade your privacy and put your life on hold as they question every purchase you've made? Most people cannot afford to fight the IRS, and again, lower income people are more likely to incur irreversible damage. Carole set her crossword puzzle down, hushing her grandchildren as the knock on the door echoed through the house. Maybe it was a neighbor, a fundraiser, or even a Jehovah's Witness, she thought. But she would have welcomed all three over what darkened her door. 2 IRS agents. Their badges felt like a gut punch. It's concerning when you get a call or a letter from the IRS, but a house visit? This must be serious. They must have the wrong house. But the IRS made no mistake. After introducing themselves, they wasted no time delivering the haymaker. They'd seized her business bank account, flagged it for, quote, suspicious activity. The crime? Regularly depositing cash under $10,000, a practice known as structuring or actively dodging federal reporting laws. Yet no agencies charged her with the crime. Still, they stole her funds, totaling around $33,000, which she relied on for her survival and her staff's as well. Carole, a taco-slinging grandma with no criminal record knocking on 70's door, scrambled to survive, borrowing money where she could and maxing out credit cards like a desperate gambler. Thankfully, the Institute for Justice swooped in to assist by filing claims on her behalf in a case known as U.S. vs. $32,820.56. No, really, that was the name of the case.
But, it's not a joke.
After a year of court proceedings, the truth surfaced. Carole was no tax dodger, just an everyday American caught in a web of red tape and bureaucracy. Finally, in 2014, the IRS relented and surrendered her money. But the victory was bitter. The court cost totaled twice as much what the IRS took. After 28 years of honest work supporting her family and the community, Mrs. Ladies ended on a tragic note. After the 2015 case, the IRS shifted policy to only focus on cases with evidence of criminal behavior, which is progress, I guess, but it's shocking that that wasn't the case to begin with. After that, Carole stepped out of the spotlight. Now at about 79 years old, she's likely retired, living quietly near Spirit Lake and spending time with family. Adding salt to the wounds, her bid to have legal fees paid out under the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act was denied in 2016, concluding her legal chapter and dashing any hope of seeing the money that the government robbed her of. But let's take inventory. We have a 70-year-old woman running an honest business. This was a place where blue-collared Americans came for Taco Tuesdays and girlfriends yapped over jumbo strawberry margaritas. This was not a place where you would find any Don Julio 1942 behind the bar or Wagyu beef burritos on the menu. Still, without a shred of evidence or a criminal record, the government still put the boot on her neck. Why? Some say it's a war on entrepreneurism. Others say the IRS is drunk on power. But to abolish the IRS, those funds keep the lights on with Social Security, Medicare, and defense. We could swap them out for consumption taxes or state contributions, but such a feat would be messy, perhaps a pie in the sky. If the IRS is here to stay, it needs severe reform and a shorter leash. Sadly, I didn't have to dig deep for this story. What happened to Carole is just another nightmare for the American entrepreneur. For the federal government, another forgotten notch in their headboard. Well, that's going to do it for this version of NPC Overrider. I'm your lead engineer, Greg. If you want to help save the NPCs, please set the like button to true and share with a friend who needs to have their source code challenged. If you have an idea for a future release, please open up a ticket in the comments section. We'll get back to you ASAP. Also, please consider subscribing. We'd sure love to have you on our development team. But for now, we're going to shut down the office and grab a beer. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good one.